You wake up not in your own bed, not even in a proper building, but wrapped in a thin wool blanket under a wide, endless sky. The prairie is still half dark, the stars fading above, and your body aches from sleeping directly on the packed earth. The chill of dawn cuts through your clothes, shirt stiff with dried sweat, coarse trousers, and boots that haven't dried since the last river crossing 2 days ago. You're a cowboy now, whether you want to be or not. Somewhere in Texas in the late 1860s, and the herd has another 100 miles to go before reaching the railhead in Kansas. There's no time to stretch or complain. You were one of a dozen drovers what real cowboys are actually called, and you've got about 2,000 head of longhorn cattle to keep in check. One wrong move, one loud sound, and those animals will stampede and crush anything in their path, including you. Coffee is served in a dented tin cup, black as coal and bitter as the heart of a rustler. Breakfast is leftover beans, maybe a strip of bacon if you're lucky, eaten standing up, using a biscuit as a spoon. There's no fresh bread out here, no eggs, no butter. The cook called the cookie has been up for hours already, starting the fire and heating up iron pots in the back of a ramshackle wagon known as the chuck wagon. That wagon holds everything you eat, and everything you use to patch a saddle or boil water or clean a wound. If it breaks, you do without. You mount your horse, stiffly, wincing at the familiar pinch in your thighs. You've been riding this same animal for days, and you'll ride 6 more before switching out. The drive is a slow, monotonous crawl, about 10 to 15 miles a day, moving the herd north to market. The job isn't glamorous. It's a grind. Your job is to ride on the flanks or the rear, keeping the cattle moving, watching for signs of sickness, watching for wolves, and watching for rustlers always watching. There's no break, no room for error, no one to help you if something goes wrong. The land is not empty, but it feels like it. It stretches to the horizon. Old sagebrush, prairie grass, dry riverbeds, and patches of mesquite. The cattle don't care how tired you are. They walk and walk and walk, and you follow, on horseback, in the dust, under the punishing sun. You wear a bandana, not to look stylish, but to filter out the dirt from your lungs. The air is dry. Your throat cracks. Water is rationed carefully. You refill your canteen only at specific stops creeks or shallow rivers that may or may not be there when you arrive. Around midday, the heat is brutal. There's no shade. You might chew tobacco just to keep your mouth moist or suck on a piece of leather. No one talks much, not out of meanness, but because there's nothing to say. You're focused, always, on the herd. A single frightened cow can turn into a disaster. They're wild things, these longhorns, descended from Spanish cattle. Their horns can stretch 6 feet across. They'll gore you if they get spooked. And they do get spooked by thunder, by snakes, by a rabbit jumping from a bush. Lunch, if it happens at all, is jerky and stale bread you eat in the saddle or leaning against a fence post, if there's one nearby. Sometimes the herd has to cross water. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes it hails. You ride through it anyway. The cattle don't stop for weather, and neither do you. As dusk settles in, your real work begins. The cattle are penned in a temporary circle for the night, and 2 of you tonight, it's you draw. The short straw for night watch. You'll ride slow circles around the herd until dawn, humming low tunes, anything to soothe the animals and keep them from bolting. Just moonlight and the occasional flare of lightning far away. You're alone out here, in the dark, in the quiet. Coyotes yip. In the distance, your horse shifts beneath you, sensing movement you can't quite see. There are no fences, no telegraphs, no help coming if something happens. And it often does. Once, one of the drovers fell asleep during night watch. The cattle stampeded, and he never got up again. They found him 3 miles away, crushed into the mud, his ribs like broken piano keys. You remember that story now, riding your circle in the dark, humming some old ballad your grandfather used to sing. You don't want to die out here, faceless and flattened, but you're not sure you'll make it home either. You think about quitting. Everyone does. But where would you go? You're probably 16, maybe 17. You own nothing but what you wear. You eat what you're given. You sleep when you can. There's no big payoff waiting for you at the end. You'll get maybe $30 for a month of riding, sleeping on the ground, eating moldy bread, and risking your life every night. That's if the cattle make it all the way to and even then, you don't get paid until the cattle are sold, which might take days, even weeks. You might spend your wages in one night on a poker game or on whiskey and a hot bath at the local saloon. You might blow it all on new boots, or a girl, or just lose it to a card cheat. Before you even get your steak dinner, your horse snorts. You feel it too, something moving in the brush. Maybe nothing. Maybe a coyote. Maybe a man with a rope, hoping to sneak off with a steer. You grip the rifle slung across your saddle, the barrel cold and heavy. You don't want to shoot, not unless you have to. You don't even want to move too fast. Any loud sound and the cattle might run. And if they do, it's over. You'll be trampled in the dark. You won't even know what hit you. And so, you keep riding your circle. The same loop, over and over. Praying the moonlight holds. Praying the cattle stay calm. Praying you're not next to disappear in the night. But what happens if one of them bolts? If the herd panics, what do you do then? The darkness never ends out here. You keep circling, and the stars wheel overhead. Indifferent, the prairie wind picks up just after midnight, carrying with it a scent. You don't recognize distant rain, maybe, or sage crushed under hooves. Your horse's ears twitch. Something's wrong. Then it happens. One cow bellows, loud and sharp. Another follows. Then, the sound you dread. Thunderous hooves, pounding the earth in 100 directions. A stampede. There's no time to think. You press your knees into your horse, and shout words don't matter. Just noise. You ride hard, racing toward the front of the herd, trying to angle them into a circle before the chaos consumes everything. This is what you've trained for. What every drover fears the most. If the cattle run straight, they'll kill themselves or you. But if you can bend them and turn their momentum, they'll eventually calm. You shout yourself hoarse, swinging your lariat in the air, slapping the reins, and praying. Another rider appears, one of the older men. You don't know his real name. Everyone calls him Prairie Dog. He's missing an eye and rides like he was born in the saddle. Together, you flank the stampede, nudging it into a wide arc. Dust chokes the night. Your lungs burn. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. The ground shakes like thunder. But slowly, the herd begins to spiral, the frenzy easing into a panicked loop. It takes nearly an hour, but the stampede breaks. The cattle are slow, their chests heaving, their eyes wild. A few are missing strays that bolted into the dark or collapsed under their own panic. You'll look for them in the morning if the wolves haven't gotten to them first. You hope no one is dead. One of the riders has a broken arm. Another has a limp, but everyone is still breathing. By the time the sun rises, the world feels bruised. The cook sets out breakfast stiff. You can call it that. Bitter coffee hardtack and a piece of cold fatback that smells faintly of iron. No one talks about the stampede. They just eat in silence, eyes low, as if ashamed to have survived it. That's the way it is out here. Talking too much about danger just invites more. Later, you help gather the strays. One steer lies stiff in the grass, legs twisted, neck broken. You dig a shallow pit and bury it as best you can. No ceremony. Just a few words under your breath. Maybe. The cattle move on. The drive continues. No one waits. By midday, the prairie has turned into an oven. The sun beats down like a hammer. You keep your hat low, your eyes squinted. The bandana stays over your face, filtering the dust. Though it does little good, your skin cracks. Your lips blister. You dream of water, even when you're drinking it. Somewhere in the afternoon haze, you remember your mother's voice, soft and worried, warning you not to take this job. But you were stubborn. You thought being a cowboy meant freedom, adventure, and stories to tell. You didn't know it meant hunger and injury and endless hours in the saddle. Most real cowboys aren't guns. That's something dime novels made up. Out here, no one wants a fight. Bullets are expensive, wounds get infected, and justice is slow and dirty. The men you ride with are tough, but not cruel. They laugh sometimes. They're hum tunes. They swat flies and mend gear and tie knots so tight you could hang from them. You spend part of the afternoon fixing a broken stirrup. You use raw hide, softened in water, wrapped around the iron like a splint. Everything here is patched or tied or improvised. If your saddle gives out, you ride back. If your boot splits, you wrap it in cloth. There's no store, no blacksmith, no replacement. Only what you brought and what you can fix. The cook gets a fire going early tonight. There's something resembling stew, mostly beans, with bits of dried beef and wild onion. You eat it without complaint, your stomach grateful for anything warm. Prairie Dog tells a story about a herd that stampeded straight through a river and drowned half the cattle. Another man, Muley, talks about a boy who got kicked in the head and forgot how to speak for a week. They laugh, but quietly. Everyone knows how close those stories come to being true again. You roll out your blanket under the stars. There's no tent, no pillow, just the ground, still warm from the day's heat. You listen to the wind, the rustle of cattle, and the faint jangle of a bell tied to the led steer. Somewhere, far off, an owl calls. Maybe a coyote answers. Your muscles ache in ways you didn't know they could. Your spine hums with fatigue. The soles of your feet throb. You fall asleep thinking about towns, about beds and roofs and food that isn't hard or bitter. But towns are far away, days away. And when you get there, you'll probably miss the quiet. Just before sleep pulls you under, you wonder how the older men do it. Prairie Dog must be 50, maybe more, and he rides like the dust is part of him. Does it get easier, or does your body just stop complaining after enough years of pain? You'll wake before dawn again. You'll drink the same coffee, ride the same trail, lose more cattle, patch more gear. You're not even halfway to Kansas yet, and there's no guarantee the cattle you do bring will fetch a good price. There are rumors of bandits near the border. Some say native raiding parties have taken to watching the trail. Others whisper about bad weather-flooded rivers and hailstones, big enough to kill a man. Because there's no choice. You signed on for the drive, and a cowboy who quits midway doesn't eat, doesn't earn, and doesn't get asked back next season. How many more days until something breaks in your body or your mind? What if the real danger, ISNT stampedes or outlaws or wolves, what if it's simply not being able to take it anymore? You've lost count of the days now. Maybe it's been 2 weeks, maybe 3. Time isn't measured in hours out here, it's counted in hoofbeats, in campfires, in sunrises that sting your eyes, and sunsets that feel like they might be your last. The trail north has changed, with the land. What began as endless grassland is now broken by rocky canyons and bone-dry creeks. Every day, you scan the horizon for signs of trouble. Circling buzzards, distant dust trails, and lightning that doesn't come with rain. You've learned to spot broken hooves, bloated bellies, and cattle with glassy eyes, the signs of heat stroke or disease. One sick cow can infect the whole herd. If you're not quick to spot it, the herd has thinned. You've lost close to 50 head, some to river crossings, others to accidents, and a few simply disappeared into the wild. You've found the carcasses of 2, stripped down to bone by another was shot clean through the eye by someone who knew what they were doing. You never found out who. Could have been a rustler. Could have been another drover taking meat on the sly. No one talks about it. One night, not long after a brutal storm leaves your gear soaked and your nerves frayed, Muley collapses while saddling his horse. His skin is pale. His breath rattles. Prairie Dog crouches next to him and mutters something about sun sickness and blood like syrup. You watch helplessly as Muley lies there, eyes half open, lips too dry to speak. He doesn't get up the next morning. There's no funeral, just a shallow grave under a stunted cottonwood. Prairie Dog carves a cross from mesquite and drives it into the dirt. No one says anything. You all ride on, You think about Muley a lot in the days that follow. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old either. He didn't drink too much. He kept his gear tidy. He minded the cattle. And still he died. Just worn out. Like a boot with no soul. It makes you wonder how close you are to the same fate. You haven't had a clean shirt in weeks. You've barely washed your hands. Your feet are swollen. You've lost weight. Your gums bleed when you chew anything too hard. This is what cowboy life really is. No guitar under the stars. No saloon brawls. No glory. Just attrition. Just surviving. One more day, then another. But one evening, as the sun bleeds into the hills and the air finally cools, you spot it. A thin line of smoke curling into the sky. A water tower in the distance, and the glint of rails in the fading light. You've made it to Abilene. The town is louder than you expected. Dirt roads, a few low buildings, and some two-story wooden structures. With peeling paint, the rail yard buzzes with activity, steam, shouting men, and the clatter of iron wheels. A telegraph office hums, like a nervous heart. This is the end of the line for the cattle. They'll be loaded into rail cars and shipped east, where the meat brings real money. You watch as the herd is counted. A man with a cigar and a clipboard scribbles numbers, while the trail boss negotiates payment. There's tension in the air. You all stand nearby, covered in dust, smelling of sweat and old leather, like ghosts from a different world. You're not part of the town. Not really. You're just passing through. Eventually, payment is made. Not cash, but promises. You're told to wait until morning, when the money will be divided. Some of the older drovers wander off to find whiskey or women. Others head straight to the bathhouse, eager to scrub off the trail. You stay by the fence, watching the last of the longhorns shuffle into the rail cars. It feels strange. You've been with them for weeks. You knew their rhythms, their sounds. Now they're gone, and you're left standing with nothing but a few coins, a sore back, and a 1,000-yard stare. That night, you sleep in a bed for the first time in a month. It's scratchy and smells like mildew. But it doesn't matter. You lie there, motionless, feeling the phantom sway of your horse beneath you, as if your body can't forget the trail. In the morning, you get paid. $31, folded and handed over without ceremony. The cook takes his cut. Prairie Dog disappears without a word, off to sign on with another drive. Some of the others talk about heading to Dodge City. Others mention California. You think about home, but it feels like another lifetime. You walk into a general store and stare at the shelves. There are things you've forgotten. Existed soap, apples, cheese, fresh bread, a mirror. You catch your reflection and hardly recognize yourself. Your eyes are sunken. Your hair is filthy. You look like someone who has been in a fight with the earth and barely made it out alive. You buy new socks, a bar of lye soap, a slice of pie that makes you tear up a little. Then you walk out into the street and wonder what's next. There's another cattle drive leaving in a few weeks. North, this time. Up into Wyoming. They're looking for hands. You know what it means? More dust, more hunger, more nights watching the stars from the saddle. But what else is there? You've survived something most won't even try. You've walked through fire or close enough to it, and maybe that's worth something. But deep down, a part of you knows you can't do this forever. Your body won't allow it. The trail eats men 1 mile at a time. Quietly, without apology, you stand on the edge of town, boots heavy in the dust, watching a new group of drovers saddle up and ride out. One of them looks about your age. Face, nervous, hat too big. He doesn't know yet. He will, and you wonder, is this how it starts for everyone? Not with a dream, but with nowhere else to go. How many cowboys lasted more than a few seasons? How many just disappeared into the trail, one grave at a time? You step off the wagon and immediately regret it. The street is a stew of mud, horse manure, and discarded trash. Your boots sink slightly, and the smell sours sharp, unidentifiable, punches you in the face like a drunk gambler. You're in a frontier town now, somewhere on the edge of nowhere. Probably Dakota Territory, maybe Nebraska. The sign over the general store says Dry Gulch, but you doubt that's the real name. These places are always called something half serious, towns that grow too fast and die even faster. You look around, wooden buildings hastily nailed together, lean at odd angles, like they're too tired to stand upright. There's the saloon, of course loud, full, even this early in the morning. A few people sit outside on benches, some too drunk to stand, others spitting tobacco juice and watching the world fall apart. To your left is the blacksmith, shirtless and glistening, pounding iron into horseshoes. Across the street, the Undertaker-esque sign creaks gently in the wind he's always the second man to arrive in a new town, right after the bartender. You came here looking for work, or maybe a fresh start. Everyone does. But frontier towns aren't built for comfort. They're not built to last either. They're thrown together around a single promise. Gold, land, timber, cattle, or the railroad. And when that promise fades, so do the people. The buildings fall, the signs rot, the mud returns. You head for the boarding house every town has one. A thin woman with tobacco-stained teeth offers you a room upstairs. It smells of mildew and old stew, but the mattress is real, and there's a basin of cold water on the washstand. Luxury. By frontier standards, you wash your face, trying not to think about how many other faces have used this same basin. Then you head downstairs and into the street, careful to step over the sleeping dog and the pile of something you hope is just mud. Most of the town is already awake. A wagon rumbles past, its axle groaning. Children dart between horses, barefoot and what? A preacher stands on a crate near the well, quoting scripture to no one in particular. You pass a small shop selling medicinal elixirs, bottles filled with brown liquid and promises. They all say the same things. Cure all. No side effects. Miracle tonic. Most are just whiskey, maybe mixed with laudanum, if the vendor wants customers to sleep through the side effects. You step into the saloon. It's cooler inside, shaded and smoky. Sawdust coats the floor to soak up the spit, blood, and vomit. The piano player is missing half his fingers. He still manages to hammer out a tune with grim determination. Men sit around tables drinking rot-gut whiskey from cloudy glasses, talking in low tones or laughing too loudly at nothing. The bartender eyes you, then nods toward a corner where the local lawman sits with a stack of cards and a half-finished bottle. His badge is dull and pinned slightly crooked on his vest. He doesn't look up. No one really respects the badge out here. Law is more suggestion than rule. You order a drink. It burns going down, but the burn is good. Clears your throat, silences your nerves. You've made it this far. That's something. Later, you wander into the general store. It sells everything. Boots, nails, salt pork, calico, dried beans, cigars, and bullets. A tin of coffee costs more than you'd make in 3 days, hauling freight. Behind the counter, a man with no eyebrows counts coins with ink-stained fingers. You ask if there's work. He shrugs. Maybe the livery needs help, or the mill, or the mine. If you don't mind choking on dust, you nod. That's how jobs are offered here. Vague gestures. Hints. The town doesn't care what you do. As long as you don't steal or shoot the wrong person. You walk past the dentist next. He's set up in a tent too new to have his own building yet. A sign hangs outside that reads, Painless Extractions -25. You see a man inside, sitting stiff as a board, while the dentist leans in with pliers and no gloves. There's no anesthesia, just whiskey and a strap of leather to bite. Blood spatters the floor. The patient screams once. Then it's quiet. Your stomach turns. You keep walking. Behind the livery, you find the outhouse. It's as bad as you imagine. Flies, filth, and a stench that makes your eyes water. People die from the water here. You're told. Dysentery, cholera, or something called summer complaint. The well might be fouled, or the cook at the boarding house doesn't boil things long enough. But who has time for questions when you're trying to stay upright? You pass by the jail. It's one room, made of warped planks with a door that doesn't shut properly. Inside sits a man with a black eye and no pants, humming to himself. No one seems in a hurry to let him out or feed him. Jail is mostly for show justice. Tends to come from rope or pistol. That night, the saloon fills up. Miners, drifters, whores, gamblers, and peddlers all squeeze into the haze, their voices rising like insects in summer. A fistfight breaks out near the back. Chairs crash. A man stumbles out with blood on his lip and a grin on his face. No one calls for the sheriff. There's no sheriff, just the man with the badge and the bottle, still playing cards. You climb the stairs to your room and sit on the bed, looking out the window at the street. It's not quiet. It never is. Someone's shouting, a baby's crying. Laughter drifts up from the alley. The town is alive, but just barely, like a feverish patient waiting to either recover or die in the night. And you wonder, how do people live here year after year? How do they survive the sickness, the stink, the violence, and the hopelessness? Is this really what the American frontier was built on? Or is this just a dream gone rotten? Morning in Dry Gulch comes not with peace, but with noise. A gunshot cracks the dawn just one. It's not followed by more, so nobody bothers to react. You blink your eyes open in the dim room, throat dry, stomach hollow. The floorboards creak as someone walks past your door, coughing hard and wet. There's no mystery here. The air is full of smoke and sawdust. The floor is stained with old water rings, and worse, you woke up. That's all that matters. Downstairs, the landlady pours burnt coffee into a chipped cup and hands you a plate of gray eggs and stale cornbread. She doesn't speak. You chew slowly, swallowing the taste of dust with each bite. Outside, the street is already busy. The blacksmith's fire crackles. The livery yard stinks of manure and wet hay. A man vomits into the gutter, then lights a cigar. Life, such as it is, goes on. You decide to try the mill. It's a sawmill, operated by a handful of half-sober men and a dozen boys with sunken eyes and bruised arms. The boss, a heavy-set man with a missing ear, says, "You can stack lumber if you don't mind splinters or crushed fingers." By midday, your back aches from lifting boards that seem heavier with each pass. You can't breathe well through the dust. You're given no gloves. Your shirt soaks through with sweat, then dries stiff in the heat. The foreman shouts over the buzz of the saw blades, and the boys move fast to avoid being noticed. One isn't quick enough. A blade catches a knot in the wood, jumps, and takes part of the boy's thumb. Blood sprays. No one screams. Not even the boy. He just stares at his hand, confused. They wrap it in a rag and send him home. You stay till sundown, your arms sore, your stomach growling. You're handed 35 cents and a warning. Don't be late tomorrow. You nod and leave, the coins hot in your palm. On the way back to the boarding house, you pass the preacher again. He's still on his crate, reading scripture with a cracked voice, sweat pouring down his neck. No one listens. The drunk stumbles by and mutters something cruel. The preacher doesn't stop. You're not sure if it's faith or madness that keeps him going. Maybe both. You stop at the bathhouse tonight. It costs 10 cents and includes a half-clean towel and a bar of gritty soap. The water is tepid, but you sink into it with a groan. The grime floats off your skin like memory. The attendant, a bored teenager with a twitch in his cheek, sits nearby with a shotgun across his lap. People have been robbed here before, killed, even. No one takes chances anymore. After the bath, you walk the main street in clean clothes. You almost feel human. You'll pass the dentist again. This time, he's selling teeth second-hand dentures lined up on a velvet cloth. A woman in a shawl is examining a set with grim seriousness. You hear her ask, "How many in the town died of fever last year?" The dentist just says, "Enough." At the saloon, you nurse one drink for an hour. The piano player is gone tonight. In his place, a girl sings a slow, sad tune about a river and a boy who drowned in it. Her voice wavers, but everyone listens. A man at the next table wipes his eye with the back of his hand and mutters something about the Missouri. You watch the faces Farmers with cracked knuckles, traders with ink-stained fingers, soldiers with scars, prostitutes with tired eyes. This is the frontier, and it doesn't care who you are, only how long you can last. Someone shouting outside. A fight, maybe. You hear glass break. No one moves. Fights are constant. The town has no jailer, only a rope behind the livery, and men willing to use it. Later, you learn the fight was over a woman or maybe a horse. It's always one or the other. The man who lost had his ear bitten off. The man who won is drinking for free until sunrise. That's the law here. Not what's written, but what's done. Back in your room, you find a note slid under the door. It's from the landlady, asking if you'll fix the back steps in the morning. She can't pay much, but she'll throw in breakfast and clean sheets. You agree. Even small jobs help. Money disappears fast out here, into whiskey, or gambling, or patching a ripped boot. The days start to blur. You wake, work, eat, and try not to get sick. You learn to keep your eyes down, your back straight, and your answers short. There are no sheriffs here. Not really, just men with weapons and tempers, and a willingness to use both. You hear stories every day. A man hanged for stealing a chicken, a woman locked in a root cellar for calling someone's child ugly, and a boy who went missing after sneaking behind the saloon. Yet somehow, there's life too. A baby is born in the middle of the night. A couple gets married in the church while the preacher sobs behind his Bible. Someone bakes bread and sells it for pennies. The smell drifting down the street like hope. You try not to get attached. You don't learn many names. People disappear too often. One day, you wake up and the man in the room next to yours is gone. His boots are still under the bed. No one knows where he went. No one looks. There are worse things than death here. Loneliness. Rot. The slow decay of your own memories, until even your voice sounds like someone else's. And yet, the town keeps going. The mill keeps sawing. The drinks keep flowing. The people keep waking up. But how long before you stop being a visitor and become part of this place? What happens when you realize there's no place left to go? Weeks pass. You stop counting. The sky still stretches wide above the town, and the dirt still clings to your boots. But the days blur together like raindrops in a puddle. You no longer flinch at gunshots. You don't ask questions when someone disappears. You don't even bother to shave. You've learned the rhythm of Dry Gulch. You fix steps, stack lumber, and haul crates. You sleep on a mattress stuffed with straw, eat beans when there's nothing better, and try to stretch your coins like jerky. The landlady starts calling you hired hand. Instead of mister, it's meant kindly. You don't mind. There's a woman who sells sweetbread down by the stables. She hums while she works, and always gives you the slightly burned one for half price. You've never learned her name. You suspect she doesn't want you to. That's how it works here. Connections are made carefully, if at all. Everyone is one bad storm, one bad cough, or one wrong look away from vanishing into the dust. The saloon remains the beating heart of town. It's where people gather to forget. You drink less than you used to, partly because money's tight, partly because you've learned what happens when you let your guard down. You've seen men laugh themselves to death, right there at the poker table, too drunk to realize they were bleeding. One night, the girl who sings her name is Clara, though few say it aloud, gets into an argument with a man who came in from another town. He puts his hand on her arm. She slaps him. He grabs her. Someone pulls a revolver. Then a shot. Clara stumbles backward, untouched. The man falls. His blood pools on the sawdust floor. No one screams. No one flees. The piano stops. Then slowly, the chatter resumes. The bartender drags the man out back. You never see him again. After that, Clara sings slower songs. Her voice is the same, but something in her eyes is missing. You wonder if she ever had a choice, come in here, or if she ended up like you, stuck because nowhere else would take her. One morning, the preacher collapses mid-heat stroke. Or maybe his heart gave out. A few men carry him to the doctor's shack, but by sundown, the crate he used as a pulpit is being chopped up for kindling. A new man stands in his place the next day, quoting the same verses. No one knows where he came from. No one asked. There's comfort in the routine now. Strange as it seems, you know which boards creak in the boarding house. You know which merchants will shortchange you, and which ones just want to talk. You've found a rhythm, if not peace. Your hands are tougher, your eyes are more cautious, but something in you wonders how much of yourself you've traded away. One night, a stranger rides into town. He's dressed cleaner than most, his boots polished, his face too pale. He says he's from Chicago, or maybe New York. He changes the story. He wants to know about real frontier life. He has a notebook and asks too many questions. You listen from the bar as he interviews the bartender, the blacksmith, and even the girl who sings. He doesn't understand the answers. He wants anecdotes, gunfights, and legends. What he gets are stories about broken carts, bad water, and children lost to fever. He leaves after 2 days. You watch him ride out. His notebook full of things he'll probably rewrite to sound better. You wonder what he'll say when he goes back east. Will he tell them about the rot in the floorboards? About the dentist with the hands that never stop shaking? About the girl who stopped smiling after the shooting? Or will he talk about wide skies and brave men and leave the rest behind? Later, the mill burns down. No one knows how it started. Some say it was lightning. Others blame sabotage or drunken carelessness. By the time anyone notices, half the building is gone. The boss vanishes. The boys scatter. Your job, like many others, turns to ash. People start leaving. Wagons roll out daily, packed with whatever can be salvaged. The preacher's replacement is gone one morning. The pulpit empty. Clara stops singing. She walks away one night, holding nothing but a carpet bag. The saloon stays open, but it's quieter. The bartender says nothing when you pay for your last drink with coins you've been saving for weeks. He just nods. You pack your things. Not that there's much, some clothes, a knife, a length of rope, a book with missing pages. You leave the room, key on the dresser. Even though the door doesn't lock, at the edge of town, you stop. The road ahead is long and unfamiliar. You could head west, toward the mountains, or south, where they say there's land to claim, though no one ever comes back. You think of Chicago, of the sea, of places with sidewalks and chimneys, but none of that feels real anymore. You glance back at Dry Gulch. The dust swirls around the buildings like it always has. The sun beats down the same. A man is hammering a new sign over the blacksmith's shop. Life continues, or at least it pretends to, and maybe that's what the frontier really is. Not adventure or freedom or some noble struggle, just a slow, grinding attempt to build something out of nothing, to hold on to a corner of the world before the wind takes it back. You ride on, boots cracked, lungs full of dust, heart uncertain. You've survived Dry Gulch. But how many people didn't? And if a town vanishes and no one remembers it ever really exist? You came for gold. Everyone did. That's what they told you in Missouri. The streets out west were lined with it. Mountains bursting with veins. Rivers thick with flakes. If you had hands to dig and luck on your side, you'd never be poor again. It sounded insane. But so many believed it that you figured it couldn't all be lies. You weren't alone. Thousands made the same mistake. They called it gold fever. Not because it made people sweat, though it did. Not because it killed people, though it surely did that too. It was called a fever because once you caught it, nothing else mattered. Family, safety, sanity, it all burned away in the fire of want. You thought you'd be smarter than the rest, that you'd get in, strike it rich, and get out before things went south. But gold doesn't work that way. The journey itself nearly broke you. You joined a wagon train headed west, riding alongside men who stank of tobacco and ambition, and women with babies wrapped in quilts. Days stretched long and dry. Nights brought strange howls and blistering cold. You crossed rivers that nearly pulled the oxen under. You watched one wagon overturn in a ravine, crushing a man's leg. He screamed for 2 days, before his brother put a bullet in him to make the sound stop. and that was just the journey. By the time you arrived in California, or anywhere, you were thinner, meaner, and already regretting everything. The place wasn't gold. It was dust. Hills that looked dead. Forests full of mosquitoes. And tents. So many tents. A sea of canvas and smoke. Men digging like animals. Shouting, cursing, and fighting. The town, if you could call it, that was just a string of makeshift shops and gambling dens. Signs, promised tools, maps, and miracles. None of them delivered. You paid too much for a pan and shovel. Bought a sack of flour that turned out to be half weevils. Then you set out into the hills, looking for a claim that hadn't been picked clean. It was already too late. The 49ers, the earliest ones, had scooped up the easy gold a year ago. Now, all that was left were rocks and false hopes. You picked a spot by a stream, dug a hole, and prayed. Every pan you swirled gave you nothing but sand. You kept digging. The work was brutal. Your hands blistered and bled. Your back spasmed. Your legs cramped. The sun made your neck peel like old paper. You drank from streams that reeked of horse piss and ate beans that were never fully cooked. Sometimes, if you found a few flecks of gold so tiny, they barely caught the light, you'd trade them for coffee. It tasted like mud, but it felt like home. Other times, you found nothing. Around you, men went mad. You saw one man fire his pistol into the trees, shouting that the gold was watching him. Another tried to eat his own boot after going 4 days without food. A fight over a claim turned into a duel, two drunk fools, shooting wildly until one dropped and the other limped away with a gut wound that festered 4 days before he died too. Just grifters with laudanum and bone saws. You learned not to ask names. Everyone lied anyway. There was a man called Jack who swore he'd struck a He showed off a pouch of nuggets one night and bought drinks for everyone in camp. 2 days later, someone slit his throat in his tent and vanished with the gold. No one cried. No one asked questions. Everyone just dug a little faster, hoping to find what he found. You started to understand how this place worked. It wasn't about gold. Not really. It was about desperation. Men clawed through the earth, not because they believed they defined riches, but because they were too terrified to stop. If they admitted it was over, they'd have to face the truth. They gave up everything. They got nothing in return. So they kept digging. You tried other methods. Drift, mining, tunneling, panning deeper in the creek. You even tried to partner up with a grizzled old man who claimed to have a map passed down from a dying prospector. Turned out it was just scribbles on the back of a newspaper. He disappeared one night, took your last can of pork and your blanket. Winter came hard. You built a shelter out of canvas, mud, and tree limbs. Wind whistled through the cracks. Your fingers stiffened until you couldn't hold your pen. Frost bit your nose. Food became precious. A man offered you half a biscuit in exchange for your boots. You almost said yes. Once, in the middle of a storm, you thought about heading back. But back to what? You had no money, no wagon, no friends. You barely remembered your name some days. Instead, you stayed, like the rest, hoping for a miracle. One morning, the creek turned gold, for real. You stared, dumbfounded, as hundreds of shimmering flakes floated past. Men screamed, splashed in, and scooped it by the fistful. Someone shouted about a busted dam upstream. A mine had flooded, sending everything downstream, including the owner's stash. It was chaos. Men trampled each other for handfuls. Some drowned. Others were stabbed with You got maybe a thimble less worth before the rush turned violent and someone knocked you unconscious with a rock. When you woke, your stash was gone. So was your hat. You never saw the same volume of gold again. And yet, you stayed. You don't know why. Maybe the fever never really leaves once you catch it. Maybe after everything, hunger, blood, betrayal you can't admit you lost. You heard whispers of other places, Nevada, Colorado, even Alaska, where new strikes were happening. Some men left. Others died waiting. You dug your shovel into cold ground one more time. Somewhere, far away, People were reading about brave pioneers and the American dream, about opportunity, expansion, destiny. They never read about the mud in your boots, the ache in your teeth from scurvy, the loneliness that eats you alive while the wind howls and the gold stays just out of reach. Gold fever, they call it. But maybe it's more like a curse. It didn't take long for the shovels to stop working. You'd hammered at the stream beds until your hands were numb, but the flakes were gone. The river, once filled with glints of promise, now ran gray with ash and filth from upstreams. Everyone else noticed too. Men began to mutter about deeper veins, buried gold, and the kind of wealth that didn't come from a pan or a pick. And so began the tunneling, hard rock mining, they called it, though there was nothing romantic about it. You and a few others scraped together enough supplies to start digging into the hills. Not the big Operation Snow Stamp mills or carts, just a tarp, a few candles, and courage that bordered on madness. You picked a hillside that looked promising, though you weren't really sure why. Everyone had theories. The color of the quartz, the bend of a pine tree, the way birds flew over a ridge, none of it mattered. You tunneled because you had nothing else. The air turned cold fast as you crept deeper. Your body ached in ways that were hard to explain. Candle wax pooled beside you. Dust clogged your throat. Every sound was magnified of a tap of the hammer. Every creak of the wooden supports you barely knew how to build. You weren't a miner. You were a man with a shovel and a hunger for something that may not have ever existed. Still, deeper you went. It was dangerous. The walls crumbled if you struck wrong. One night, a man named Pete, someone who shared your hole for a few days, was buried when the ceiling gave. His boots stuck out for a while. Then they stopped twitching. No one said much. You took his food and left the rest. That was how it worked. There were days you didn't see sunlight at all. You began to forget what month it was. The journal you kept in your first weeks, full of hopeful entries and tally marks of progress, was now used to wrap moldy cheese and start fires. Your nails grew black. Your teeth loosened. You bled from the nose. Then the gums. Scurvy was everywhere. So was dysentery. And worse, miner's lung. All that quartz dust filling your chest with fine powder. You knew men who coughed themselves bloody and still kept swinging. What else could they do? In town, things weren't much better. The camps had grown wilder, more vicious. Saloons outnumbered churches 10 to 1. Opium dens flourished behind curtains. Women, those few who stayed, charged impossible prices for companionship. Men gambled away their last crumbs of gold on crooked games of faro and dice. One night, you wandered into a saloon after weeks underground. Your face barely looked human in the cracked mirror. You ordered whiskey with a flake of gold and drank until the room spun. A man told you he'd found a nugget the size of a potato. Another swore he'd killed 3 claim jumpers in one night and buried them under the fire pit. You didn't know what to believe anymore. You did know one thing. People were getting desperate. You saw it in their eyes. Men who once nodded to you in passing now looked like wolves. One group tried to steal another man's tunnel outright. They waited until he was inside, then lit brush on fire at the entrance, smoked him like a rat. No one stopped them. The law was weeks away if it even existed. The only real order came from the miners' courts, rough assemblies, where men decided guilt and punishment by vote or fist. Theft meant flogging. Murder meant hanging. One man was whipped with barbed wire for lying about a gold strike. You turned your face when he screamed. Justice was just another tool to guard someone's claim. The Chinese miners had it worse. They were efficient and methodical, careful in ways the rest weren't. They often worked land others abandoned, squeezing gold from gravel others tossed aside. For that, they were hated, beaten, driven off. Their tents were slashed. Their tools were stolen. Some towns passed foreign miner taxes if you looked different, spoke differently, or prayed differently. You paid more, or you paid with blood. You tried not to think about it. You had your own hell to manage. Eventually, someone mentioned dynamite. It was dangerous, illegal in some areas, and wildly unpredictable. But if you were desperate enough, A stick of nitroglycerin could move a mountain faster than days of swinging a pick. You learned quickly that there were no second chances with it. A man took tunnels, over-misjudged the charge, and blew himself apart. The shockwave made your ribs hurt. You found his foot half buried in the dirt later that week. You still bought your own sticks the next day. Because what else was there? Gold wasn't going to find itself. And then you found it. Not a glint behind a crack. You dug faster, scraped with a knife, and widened the seam until your fingers brushed something real. A small pocket, not a fortune but more than you'd seen in months. Enough to get you drunk for a week. Enough to tempt envy. You made the mistake of mentioning it. The next morning, someone had gone through your things. Your stash was gone. Your food, too. They'd slashed your coat for good measure. You sat on a stump and stared at the trees, wondering if that little glint had even been real or just another trick played by hunger and hope. Your tunnel collapsed in the rain. 2 nights later, you weren't inside it, by pure luck. But the sight of it, the broken boards, the mud, the wasted weeks hollowed you out. That was the last tunnel you dug. After that, you worked in a cook shack for a while, washing tin plates and boiling beans for grizzled men who didn't speak. Later, you tried hauling lumber for a sawmill that lasted 3 weeks before burning down. You wrote a letter to your brother, though you didn't send it. What would you say? Dear John, I've turned into a ghost who sleeps under trees and eats stolen biscuits. Hope the farm is well. No. Better to disappear. They were calling it a bust now. Anyway, the easy gold was gone. Only big companies with machines and payrolls were sticking around building proper shafts, draining mines, and crushing ore. People like you were just in the way. You watched wagons roll out of camp every day, carrying gaunt men and bitter women who had nothing left to lose. They didn't look back. You didn't either. Not for a while. And yet, some nights, you still walked out to the edge of the creek, just to stare at the water. Your fingers twitched, remembering the feel of the pan, the swirl of sediment, the impossible shimmer of a single flake catching the morning sun. Maybe it was still out there, just a few inches deeper. Maybe you'd try again tomorrow, or maybe you'd starve first. You woke up one morning with frost on your beard, late spring, and still the nights bite like wolves. Your coat was more patches than wool, and your boots had cracked along the soles. You hadn't eaten in a full day, maybe more. There were fewer fires in camp now. The big rush had passed. The easy gold was gone, and most of the dreamers had moved on either back east, toward Oregon, or down to California's newer booms. What remained were the truly stubborn, the cursed, and the damned. You weren't sure which one you were. The last of your tobacco had been traded for half a tin of beans. The beans had been stolen before you opened them. You stopped sleeping with both eyes closed. One evening, a man approached your fire. He looked like he'd come from far away, face windburned, eyes sunken, shoulders hunched, like they'd forgotten how to stand straight. He didn't say a word, just dropped something into your lap. A pan. You hadn't held one in weeks. You blinked at him. He nodded once, then walked away. You stared at the pan a long time. It was dented and scratched, but it would still hold water. The next morning, you walked back to the creek and crouched by the bank where the gravel shimmered in the weak light. You swirled mud like you'd done in the early days. Nothing. But you kept going. You weren't looking for wealth anymore. That dream was long dead. You were just trying to remember who you'd been when you first arrived, when hope still clung to your shoulders like dust. Word came that the army had been called in down south. Some mining camps had turned into outright war zones, vigilante justice, and entire groups being driven off at gunpoint. In one place, a whole town had burned to the ground in the night. No one knew who started it. Some said it was a gang. Others blamed the miners themselves. Didn't matter. You weren't going back. Up here, in the colder camps, the worst enemy was hunger. You watched men boil pine needles and chew leather straps. A pair of brothers were found dead in their tent, embracing each other under a frozen blanket. You helped bury them, piling rocks in silence while your breath curled in the air. Later that night, someone stole their boots. The postal rider hadn't come in over a month. Either he was dead, or he'd figured out there was no point riding this route anymore. One man carved a letter into a pine trunk. "Mother, I am still here." He scratched the date below, then sat beside it until the snow covered his legs. There was talk of a new strike farther west. The stories came the same way. They always did, through rumors passed between strangers at the edge of firelight, carried on the wind like fairy tale. Someone had found a thick vein in a canyon nobody had mapped. Gold so pure you could bite it. Most rolled their eyes. But a few packed up and left that night. You almost went to but your legs felt heavy, and your belly was too empty to risk another trek. You'd already been through 3 camps, 2 tunnels, 1 nearly fatal landslide, and a dozen false hopes. You didn't want another. You just wanted a warm meal and a quiet place to lie down. You got the meal by trading your coat. A man with a wagon full of smoked trout stopped by. He said he was heading to the next boom town before the snow hit. You handed him the coat and took to fish. You ate one that night, slow and quiet. The other you was wrapped in canvas and buried under a flat rock for later. It was gone by morning. Someone had followed you. You didn't even feel angry. You just sat by the fire and stared at the trees. A week later, the thaw began. Water ran cold and fast through the creek. The birds returned. You saw a squirrel dart through your tent one morning, chasing something invisible. It felt like a sign. You went out to the stream one last time, not with a plan, just instinct. The water was higher now, rushing over stones like it wanted to carry the whole mountain away. You crouched at a bend and dipped the pan. The motion was automatic. Scoop, swirl, shake. Let the heavy stuff settle. You felt every swirl in your arms. You didn't expect anything, but there it was. Not a nugget. Not even a flake. Just color. Tiny specks barely visible, but they were real. They stayed in the pan after the swirl, clinging like truth. You laughed. It sounded like a cough. You panned a few more times. Each one gave you a little more. Enough for a meal, a room in town, maybe. You stood up and stretched. Your knees popped. Your back groaned. But for the first time in months, you smiled. On the way back to camp, you saw smoke rising. At first you thought it was just someone's cooking fire, but then came the yelling and the shots. A group of men, maybe 5 or 6 were, tearing through the tents, overturning crates, and torching anything flammable. One had a mask. Another rode through on horseback, waving a torch. You dropped to the ground and crawled behind a boulder. Claim jumpers, bandits, drunk miners. Didn't matter. They were destroying everything. You waited until they moved on, then crept back. The camp was gone. Tents smoldered. Food was trampled. Your bedroll had been slashed, and your tools scattered like trash. The fire pit was still warm, though you used a charred stick to pull together what little was left. The gold specks you'd found was still in your pouch. You held it tight in your fist, then shoved it into your boot. Later that night, you found another man sitting at the edge of the ruins. He didn't move when you approached, just stared at the smoke. "They burned everything," he said. You nodded. He looked at you. "You think it's time?" You didn't ask what he meant. You just said yes. The next morning, you joined the trail heading west. The others had left behind muddy footprints, broken wagon wheels, and half-whispered rumors of a new place with new chances. Maybe it was real. Probably not. But the camp was gone. Your past burned with it. You walked slowly. Your boots were too loose, and the gold pouch in your right one pressed into your heel. You didn't care. You passed a dead horse on the trail, a pile of rusted pans, a man asleep under a tree who didn't wake when you called. Farther along, you heard laughter. Someone was singing, a woman's voice. You couldn't see her, but the sound drifted across the wind like smoke from a distant chimney. It made you think of home, whatever that meant. Now, you paused, looked back once, then kept going. You weren't a prospector anymore, or a miner, or a dreamer. You were just another man walking away from a river that had already taken too much. And in the Wild West, that meant you were one of the lucky ones. You'd barely slept the night before. The wagon creaked and shifted in the dark, and your bones ached from days spent bouncing along the endless prairie trail. Your boots were dust-crusted and cracked at the seams, and your shirt, once white, was now the color of the earth around you, somewhere between straw and sorrow. When dawn came, you could barely see the sun. It didn't rise like it did back east, over hills and church steeples. Out here on the plains, it just peeled itself from the horizon like a reluctant eye, and the land flat, endless and whispering offered no welcome. Your family stirred behind you. The children didn't speak. They hadn't for a day or two. They were too tired and too dry-mouthed to ask again when they'd get to see trees. There weren't any. Not real ones. Just scrubbed, twisted, and gnarled, like the hands of old men who knew too much. The land agent had promised good soil, a fine piece of property. Rich, dark, dirt, and plenty of rain. You remembered the map green and clean, drawn with cheerful lines and promises. But standing there now, on your assigned plot of prairie, you saw no such thing. It looked like nothing. A flat eternity of wind, dry grass, and distant clouds that never came close enough to matter. Still, it was yours. You began that first day with the axe. There were no trees to fell, but the wagon needed dismantling, at least the rear axle and some of the boards. You needed wood for the walls of your future home. The sod would do for the rest. That was what everyone said. Cut the earth, stack it high, and let it harden in the sun. The sod house was a cruel thing, damp in spring, crawling with beetles in summer, frozen stiff in winter. But it was better than the wagon. You needed a roof before the autumn storms. Your hands bled before the sun hit. You used a spade to cut some heavy bricks of soil held together by a lattice of roots and stacked them along the edges of a shallow trench. Your wife fetched water from the distant creek, half a mile away, hauling tin buckets that bit into her wrists. Your eldest tried to help with the digging, but the tool was too heavy, and she dropped it on her foot. Her scream carried across the prairie like a flag. You bound her toe in cloth and told her she'd be fine. That night, a coyote sang nearby. The children huddled close. The stars looked too big, too close like eyes. The wind pushed against your back, sneaking under your clothes. You kept the rifle near, not for the animals, but for your peace of mind. You didn't expect danger, not yet, but the feeling lived in your belly like a coal waiting to catch. The second day was hotter. The sky stretched wide and hard above you, and the wind never stopped. It carried dust, grit, and the smell of things too distant to name. By midday, your tongue was cracked, and your lips peeled at the edges. Your wife's bonnet flapped in the wind until it flew off and was gone forever. You didn't chase it. You laid the sod bricks higher. You had 3 walls halfway done, and your back throbbed with a pain that felt like punishment. The children picked through the grass for dry cow chips. Buffalo dung had once been plentiful, but now only cattle ranged here. You needed it for fire. There would be no trees, no kindling, and no cords of seasoned wood. Your wife tore up a corner of her apron to use as a wick. That evening, you ate boiled flour. Just that. No salt, no fat, no flavor. You called it supper. By the third day, your hands were a patchwork of blisters. The sun turned your neck to leather, and the flies came in clouds. You slapped at them until your palms stung. The baby cried for hours. No one had the energy to comfort her. The roof was your next task. You lashed together branches scavenged from miles away thin. Each piece was heavy as a stone, and you felt your strength fading with every lift. You fell once, just a stumble off the side, but you landed hard, and for a full minute, you couldn't breathe. When the air returned, it tasted like dust. That night, a storm came. You knew it was coming by the way the wind stopped. Stillness out here was a warning. It broke over you in black waves, thunder, lightning, and a sound like God dragging his shovel through the sky. The children screamed. You all crammed inside the unfinished walls, covered in a tarp, and huddled together while the roof wept mud onto your heads. Your wife whispered him. You listened for collapse, but the sod held. By morning, the walls had sagged, mud soaked into your boots, and the creek overflowed. Your grain sacks were damp, the flowers ruined. The children were coughing. You needed food. There was no store. The nearest settlement was nearly a day's ride. You had no horse. You walked 80 miles to a trading post run by a man with crooked teeth and a shotgun. You offered your pocket watch gold-plated, went your father's in exchange for flour, beans, and dried pork. He took it without blinking. You limped back under a bruised sky, beans slung over your shoulder. You chewed raw pork fat to quiet the pain. Your socks bled through by mile. When you arrived, the baby was worse. Your wife hadn't slept. The roof had sagged again. Something had chewed through one of the food sacks, a rat or a weasel. Still, you smiled. You had made it back. That night, the children sang to themselves in hoarse voices. You gave them the warmest food you'd managed in a week. It wasn't much, but it was more than before. As you lay down in the mud-walled shelter, you pressed your shoulder against your wife's and stared at the roof. The stars didn't shine tonight. You weren't sure if that was better or worse. The prairie whispered. It never slept, and you began to wonder if you ever truly would again. You woke to frost. It had crept in silently overnight, curling itself into your joints and biting at your knuckles. Every breath came out like smoke. The children stayed under the patchwork quilt, huddled together for what little warmth it offered. Your wife was already outside, breaking the thin sheet of ice in the water bucket with the handle of a spoon. You had no iron to spare for proper tools. The sod house had held through the storm, but barely. One wall sagged inward, leaking through a crack near the corner, and the roof had slumped in the middle, gathering damp weight in a silent warning. Soon, it would give. Still, you told yourself it was progress. Last week, you had a wagon. Now you had 4 walls. Shelter. Sort of. You'd known it wouldn't be easy. The handbills back east had shown happy families standing proudly beside blooming fields. A cozy home with smoke curling from the chimney and a horse tied up out front. Free land, they shouted. 160 acres of rich soil. Yours for the taking. All you had to do was survive 5 years and prove it. But no one mentioned the loneliness. No one described how the silence stretched so wide it echoed. You tried to work that day patching the sod wall and reinforcing the roof with rope and hope, but the cold had sunk deep into your bones. You'd caught a cough sometime last week, and now it rattled your chest every hour. Your wife said you should rest, but the rest didn't plant crops. The rest didn't find wood. Rest didn't kill coyotes. The children's faces were thin already, their cheeks hollowed like the land itself. You needed to plant, but the ground was stubborn. The prairie sod ran deep thick with roots from centuries of wild grass. A normal plow, the kind you use back home, wouldn't cut through it. You'd have heard of sod busters, steel plows that could chew through the hardened ground, but you didn't have one. You had a wooden blade from back east and had broken your hands on the first day, so you dug by hand, a few feet at a time, every inch won by sweat, cursing, and cracked fingers. When it rained again that week, it came sideways. There was no warning. 1 minute, it was dry and quiet. The next, the wind rose like a ghost, and the sky turned the color of gold. You rushed the children inside, threw blankets over the windows, and tried to keep the fire alive with cow chips and corn stalks. But the wind forced its way through every seam of the house. The tarp flapped loose. Water seeped through the roof. The baby screamed for hours. You didn't sleep that night, and when the sun came back, it brought something worse. Grasshoppers. At first, it seemed like dust on the horizon, brown and shifting. Then they arrived all at once. Thousands, maybe millions, covering everything. They filled the air with the sound of dry clicking, like bones tapping together. They devoured the seedlings you had just placed in the ground, ate the laundry off the line, clogged the chimney, got in your food. The children cried. Your wife wept silently as she swept them off the floor with a branch. You stayed silent. There was nothing else to do. That night, you didn't eat. The flour was gone. The beans were nearly gone. The baby had a fever. The closest doctor was in town, a place called Tabor's Landing, 22 miles away. You had no horse. Again, you walked. Your boots were worn thin by then, the leather peeling from the soles like wet paper. You wrapped your feet in spare cloth, and by the time you reached the settlement, your toes were bleeding. The doctor wasn't home. His wife gave you willow bark and a bottle of castor oil. You thanked her anyway. She looked at you like a man already halfway gone. Back on the prairie, the baby had worsened. You fed her drops of water from a spoon and kept her close to the fire. But her cries were weak. Every breath seemed harder than the last. You stayed up all night with her. The fire popped softly beside you, and your wife slept sitting up, her arms wrapped around your middle child like a shield. By morning, the baby had stopped crying. She was breathing, just barely, but her eyes didn't open for another full day. You told yourself she'd live. You needed to believe that. The following week, the weather warmed again. Not hot just enough for the ground to soften slightly. You planted what seeds remained. Corn, mostly. Some beans. A small patch of onions near the eastern wall of the house, where water pooled after rain. You marked the rows with sticks and prayed over them. Not loudly, just a whisper under your breath, when no one could hear. Your neighbor showed up the next day, a man named Mathers, from 2 miles south. He looked worse than you. Sunburnt, stooped. The shirt was hanging off him like a flag. He asked for Nelsy, was rebuilding his roof after a twister took the last one. You didn't have nails, but you gave him wire, and he left behind a half-pound of sugar and some tobacco. A fair trade. You both agreed. That was prairie life. Give what you had. Hope someone did the same. One night, lightning struck a patch of grass nearby, and you watched the fire snake its way across the flatland like a living thing. You had buckets ready and wet, blankets at the ready, but the wind shifted, and the fire turned away. You didn't sleep that night either. By your 4th month on the prairie, your body had become something new. Thinner, hungrier, but stronger in places that hadn't existed before. Your hands were permanently cracked. Your eyes squinted constantly. You measured time not by days, but by chores. When the ditch needed clearing, when the beans would sprout, and when the barrel ran dry. But the children, they laughed again. Sometimes, the middle one found a tortoise in the tall grass and named it Eli. She kept it in a box beside her blanket and fed it lettuce and scraps. The baby had regained her voice. Her fever had gone. She'd even started crawling. One morning, you sat on the dirt step of your half-finished sod house, cup of weak coffee in hand, and watched the sunrise. It wasn't beautiful, not like they said in poems. It was hard, blinding, endless. But it meant the world hadn't stopped turning. You'd survived another day. You couldn't help but wonder what would happen when winter came. The wind was already changing. By the time you'd finished storing the last of the corn, what little of it had survived the mornings came with breath. You could see again. The sun rose lower. The shadows stretched longer. And every step outside was accompanied by that unmistakable creak of cold soil hardening beneath your boots. You could smell winter in the grass. A thin, bitter scent that clung to the air, even when the skies stayed blue. There was no harvest celebration. The corn yield filled just 1.5 sacks. Most of the beans had withered in the heat of August. The onions were little more than bulbs the size of musket balls, but you stored them carefully, wrapping the sack with burlap and lining the food chest with dry grass to keep it off the dirt floor. You inventoried it in your head. A half-pound of dried cornmeal, 3 tins of fat, 4 strips of salt pork, some flour, and the final scoop of sugar, enough to make it through the week. If rationed, maybe 2. But the cold would last months. You patched the roof again this time with animal hides and reeds from the creek bed. There wasn't enough timber for proper shingles. The inside of the house smelled of earth and smoke and mildew. The children slept beside the fire each night, wrapped in wool and whatever clothes they hadn't already outgrown. You slept with your boots on now, just in case. The coyotes had grown bolder. You heard them every night long, mournful cries just beyond the circle of firelight. Once they came close enough to dig near the cabin wall, your wife woke you with a whisper, and you stepped out holding the iron skillet as your only weapon. The coyotes didn't charge. They stared for a long time, four of them, glowing eyes like stars in the grass end, then slunk away into the dark. They weren't afraid, just waiting. 1 week into the cold season, the snow came. Not all at once. Not yet, just flurries. Dry and sharp. Like grains of salt, it coated the roof, stuck to your eyelashes, and slipped between the boards of the door frame like smoke. You tightened the oilcloths around the windows and nailed a quilt over the back wall. But the cold still crept in. The baby began coughing again. You boiled pine needles for tea, burned green wood that smoked more than a flame. You even fed the family warm broth made from the feet of an old chicken that had died before the cold set in. But it helped. You made the decision, finally, to kill the last goat. It was a lean animal that had barely produced any milk all year, but it was meat. You did it quickly and quietly, behind the cabin with your knife. The blood steamed as it hit the snow. You cleaned the carcass yourself, dried what you could, and smoked the rest over 3 days, using what little hickory you could find. The smell brought the coyotes back. This time, they came during the day. One of them paced near the shed while you were splitting wood, and you turned to find its muzzle no more than 10 feet from yours. You raised the axe and it flinched, then loped away. But you knew they'd be back. That night, you stood. You wrapped your coat tight and sat near the doorway with a piece of sharpened rebar you'd saved from a broken wagon axle. Nothing came. The wind howled, and the moonlight spilled over the prairie like frost. You watched the shadow of your sod house stretch and flicker on the snow. At some point, your legs stopped feeling cold. Then they stopped feeling at all. You didn't realize you'd fallen asleep until the fire hissed and popped, waking you. It had snowed again, enough to reach your knees. You couldn't see your boot prints. The goat shed had collapsed. The children were still asleep. You looked at your hands numb, red, cracked, and flexed your fingers, just to be sure. Then you started digging. Every path had to be clear just to keep the door open, just to find the woodpile, just to make sure your wife could reach the outhouse without vanishing into white. A neighbor came by that afternoon. Mathers again. He didn't knock, just appeared near the tree line, wrapped in furs, dragging a sled behind him. He'd brought 2 rabbits and a bundle of firewood. He asked for nothing, just said, "It's worse out east." Then he left. You cried after he was gone. Not from sadness, not even from gratitude, just from exhaustion, the kind that ran too deep to speak about. By midwinter, the children had stopped asking for sweets. They ate whatever you put before them. Bean cakes, dried meat, bread made from flour that had more sawdust in it than grain. Once, you melted snow over the fire and soaked an old leather strap in it for an hour. Then you scraped it thin and fried it. You told the children it was jerky. They chewed it slowly. None of them complained. You spent your days rotating between the same chores: chop wood, boil water, mend clothes, and trap rabbits. You fashioned a few crude snares from wire and bent nails, placing them along the game trail near the creek. They caught little. Some weeks, nothing at all. But once, you caught a skunk. You didn't eat it, but you did tan the hide. Now it lined the inside of your wife's boots. Every crack in the walls had been stuffed with rags. Still, the wind moaned through. You started hearing it differently. Not as noise, but as something alive. It talked to you in dreams, in whispers that echoed inside the stovepipe and rattled across the roof. You stopped telling your wife about the voices. You didn't want to worry her. Some nights, when the fire was low and the moon was gone, you remembered the train station back east. The smell of coal, the distant screech of iron wheels, the sight of that long track stretching west toward opportunity, toward hope, toward land. It had been a lie, of course. Not the land. It was real. But the hope. Hope didn't survive out here. Not unless you fed it with flesh and sacrifice and silence. By February, The baby's cheeks had filled out again. The middle child learned how to sew a straight stitch. Your wife baked bread using crushed acorns and dried cornmeal. It was bitter but warm. And one day, the snow melted. Not all of it, but enough. You saw grass, damp earth, the shape of something green struggling to grow near the edge of the latrine pit. Spring had not arrived, but the cold had finally broken. That night, you stood outside the sod house, with your coat open, feeling the breeze on your neck. It smelled of thaw, of rot and mud and life. The stars looked closer somehow. You didn't smile, but your lungs filled deeper than they had in months. The prairie wasn't finished with you yet, but you weren't finished with it either. The first thing you notice is the stink, not of blood, not yet, not even of horses. It's the stink of men closed, unwashed, packed together in a tight, sagging wooden shack just outside the Wyoming border. Sweat, mildew, and the ghost of last night's whiskey mingled with the rotting smell of tobacco, and this is the saloon, or what passes for one. You're not sure how it came to this. You were supposed to be finding work, maybe staking out land of your own, or trying your hand at blacksmith. But somewhere between losing your horse in a poker game and finding a pistol under your bedroll, things took a turn. Now you're re-riding with a small gang of men who call themselves the Grigsby Boys. None of them are related, and not one looks over 30. They rob stagecoaches and small-town stores. Never anything big. Not yet. Just enough to keep eating. Today's plan was simple. Ride into town, get supplies, and lay low. But it's already gone wrong. It started with Big Rennie punching a stable hand just for looking at him sideways. Then Felis, who hasn't tea, bathed in a season, tossed a whiskey bottle through the general store window. When the shopkeeper refused to accept a gold flake, Edie scraped off a river stone. Within 10 minutes, the sheriff showed up, and 2 of your boys disappeared into the hills. You stayed. You weren't sure why. Now you're here, behind a saloon, crouched behind barrels that leak something awful. You've got a 6-shooter with 4 bullets, a torn shirt, and the beginnings of what might be lice along your collar. The truth is, being an outlaw isn't like the dime novels say. There's no noble code, no dramatic standoffs. At high noon, there's no honor among thieves, just cold beans, stiff saddles, and a growing certainty that no one's got your back when the bullets start flying. You're starting to understand the worst part isn't the danger, it's the filth. Your last bath was in a cattle pond. The water was warm and full of silt and flies, and you came out smellier than you went in. Your teeth ache from chewing jerky and grit. You're not sure if it's scurvy or just rot. Your boots haven't come off in 3 days, and when you tug at them, the skin on your toes peels with it. Your hat smells like grease and wet dog. Your shirt could probably stand up on its own. The outhouses, the few that exist, are just holes in the earth surrounded by splintered boards. You use them fast, mostly at night, praying you don't fall in. One guy you rode with, Pete, wasn't so lucky. Took a snake bite to the thigh, just trying to relieve himself before dawn. He made it 2 days. Fever took him before noon on the 3rd. You helped bury him in a shallow grave near the base of a dry riverbed. You didn't even carve his name. There's no glamour here, no Jesse James, just filth, fear, and the constant ache of your bones from riding too long, eating too little, and never knowing when your luck runs out. You sleep under the stars, yes, but most nights it rains. Or worse knows, blankets get soaked, boots freeze, your revolver rusts, unless you wrap it in oilcloth and sleep with it inside your coat. If it misfires during a robbery, you're dead. Not from the law, but from your own gang. They don't forgive mistakes. A misfired shot means no loot, no food, and risk. You'd be left behind, bootless in the dark. One time, in Kansas, you robbed a freight wagon carrying nothing but molasses and wool. You rode off, thinking you'd struck it rich until the molasses leaked. You smelled sweet for days. It drew flies. Your saddle was slick for a week. Your trousers hardened like armor. You had to peel them off your thighs, bled from the chafing. And the law, They're not like the movies either. Most sheriffs aren't brave. They're tired, overworked, sometimes drunk, sometimes cruel. They don't chase you across canyons with rifles raised. They just wait. They talk to the saloon girls, ask questions. They watch for patterns. And when you mess up and you will, they strike fast. There was a boy named Enoch, 116. He joined up, hoping to ride free. Thought it'd be exciting. Thought he'd be a legend. First job. He was fired early, panicked, and shot a store clerk. The man bled out screaming in front of his wife. By nightfall, the town had formed a posse. Enoch didn't make it a mile. They found him behind a haystack, sobbing. They hanged him from a cottonwood tree before dawn. You saw it from a ridge above the pasture. The wind made his body sway. You couldn't look away. Now, crouched behind the saloon, heart pounding and legs sore. You wonder if you'll end the same way, swinging in the breeze, forgotten, your name misspelled on a flyer or not remembered at all. One of the gang members, Mackie, emerges from the alley. He's got blood on his sleeve, a sack in his hand. He grins, gold tooth flashing. Time to ride, he says. You don't ask what happened. You don't want to know. You just follow. You mount your horse, which smells worse than you do, and dig your heels into its flanks. You ride hard, fast, north. Behind you, the town shrinks. Dust rises. Somewhere a bell rings. A gunshot follows. Then silence. It's always like this. Adrenaline, then regret. Hunger, then silence. The fantasy sold in those Eastern penny novels is a lie. You're not noble. You're not a hero. You're not even infamous. You're dirty, diseased, and slowly dying from exposure, malnutrition, and loneliness. And you can't stop. Not now. Not with your face on a poster and a bounty too small to matter, but just big enough to tempt a stranger. You don't trust anyone, not even the horse beneath you. And yet, part of you still hopes that maybe one day you'll find a town too small to care, too tired to ask questions, that you'll settle in, change your name, and run a livery or a saloon. Live long enough to forget the things you've done. Sleep on a real bed. Wash in real water. But you know that won't happen. You're riding toward nowhere, and nowhere's getting colder. The mail coach hits the bend right on time, drawn by two horses that look just as tired as you feel. Mackie has you crouched behind a boulder at the ridge's edge, peeking down at the road below with the cold mouth of your revolver pressed against your thigh. The plan is simple, too simple. Mackie says, I jump out, shoot the guard, and grab the satchel. You cover the back. Felix makes sure no one rides away. You'll nod, but no one's sure it'll go like that. The driver doesn't see it coming. Mackie steps into the road like a preacher at a crossroads. Pistol raised, voice loud. Throw down the bag and live. It would have worked. Maybe, but this isn't Missouri, and that isn't a mail coach. It's decoyed and armored, and the man riding shotgun isn't a guard. He's a marshal. The first shot comes from him. Felix is down before he even blinks, just a soft thud in the dust, and then silence. Mackie returns fire, fast and wild, and you freeze. Just a moment, just a breath, but it's enough. The coach rattles forward, men shouting, guns blazing, and the canyon rings with death. You fire too late, miss, fire again, and hit the horse. The animal screams and falls, and the whole coach pitches forward, wheels spinning in the air. A man is thrown. Another crawls out, coughing blood. It's over in seconds. You don't remember running down the slope, but somehow you're there kneeling beside Felix, who's already gone cold. Mackie limps toward you, bleeding from the shoulder. He doesn't say anything, just looks down at the body and spits. We ride, he says, and that's it. No burial, no farewell, no prayer. You leave Felix's body in the dust, half covered by his own hat, and ride east again, always east, like that'll save you, but it doesn't. By nightfall, you re-holed up in a barn so rotten the roof leaks, even when it doesn't rain. The smell of animal waste clings to every rafter. You share the space with a dozen mice and a mule who won T-stop, watching you with one bulging eye. Mackie's wound is deep. He drinks through the pain, using moonshine to clean it, and cursing like it's the only thing keeping him alive. You offer to help. He slaps your hand away, so you freeze. He growls. Almost got us both killed. You want to explain, to say the marshal had to drop on you, that it wasn't fear, just shock. But the words don't come. He wouldn't believe them anyway. In this world, hesitation is weakness. Weakness is death. You sit in silence. Rain begins to fall, tapping out a rhythm on the roof. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rolls. The next morning, Mackie's gone. No note, no goodbye, just his trail, faint in the damp earth, leading out of the barn and into the wild. You don't follow. There's nothing left to chase. Not justice, not vengeance, not even a coin. You take stock of your belongings again. One bullet, half a biscuit, and you are photo creased, nearly faded, the edges curling in on themselves like it's trying to disappear. You decide to head for the nearest town. It's not courage, it's exhaustion. It takes you 2 days to walk there. Along the way, you pass a burned-out cabin. Its chimney, the only thing left standing. There's a child's shoe in the mud, a broken teacup. You don't stop to wonder what happened. You already know. By the time you reach town, you can barely walk. Every part of you stinks. Your clothes hang off your bones. You're too tired to be afraid anymore. People avoid you in the street. A woman clutches her child and crosses to the other side. A storekeeper pretends not to see you. Even the sheriff, standing on the porch with a coffee in hand, just narrows his eyes and watches. He knows. You walk past anyway. You don't want trouble. Not anymore. You just want a bath. You find one in a tiny hotel with sagging wallpaper and a clerk who holds his breath as he takes your coin. The tub is cracked, the water barely warm, but it feels like heaven. You'll soak for an hour, then scrub your skin until it's raw. The dirt comes off in dark clouds. Some of it, you think, might have been there for years. Afterward, you shave. It takes effort and steady hands, and you nick your chin twice. But when you look in the mirror, there's someone else staring back. Someone quieter, tired, but human. That night, You sleep in a real bed, a mattress stuffed with straw, sheets with actual corners, no bats, no fleas, no outlaws, snoring beside you, just silence. For the first time in months, you sleep deep. And when morning comes, you don't run. You eat breakfast in the saloon, cold eggs, tough bacon, and weak coffee. You savor every bite, then you walk to the sheriff's office. He's still there. Same porch, same coffee. You meet his eyes. He doesn't flinch. He knows. Name, he asks. You tell him. He nods. You got a weapon? You hand over your revolver. One bullet. He looks at it, then looks at you. Are you done running? You nod. Good, he says. Jail's got hot food and clean water. You can stay a while. And just like that, it's over. No hanging, no bounty hunter kicking in the door. Just a cell, a roof, a chance to stop moving. It's not redemption, but it's peace. And in the Wild West, that's as rare as rain in August. Because for all the stories they tell the shootouts, the gold, the glory, what they don't tell you is this. Most outlaws don't die in a blaze of gunfire. They die from thirst, from gangrene, from betrayal, or they give up, like you did, and maybe that's the only way to survive it all. You wake before the sun, just as you did the day before, and every day before that, since you were old enough to hold a bow. The morning air is still, chilled with the last breath of night, and your breath mists faintly as you rise from your buffalo hide. Around you, the village lies in a quiet hush lodges of tanned hides arranged in a wide circle, smoke still trailing from the last embers of night fires. Somewhere, a baby cries softly, a dog barks, and then silence again. Your name is Tuck. You are 17 winters old, born to the plains, the son of a respected hunter, and the grandson of a warrior who once rode alongside Sitting Bull. You are Hunk Papa Lakota. You were raised with stories of honor, survival, betrayal, and blood. And you've been taught, since before you could speak, that your life is not yours. Alone it belongs to your people. Today, you will ride. The elders spoke last night of the bison herds returning from the west. Game has been scarce these past moons, and the stores are running thin. Winter is not far off. A successful hunt will feed dozens. Failure will starve them. You help prepare your horse, an aging mare named Kanji Raver. She is stubborn, quick-footed, and smarter than you sometimes. You braid her mane and whisper to her, calming her spirit, while you bind your leggings, tighten your moccasins, and check the grip of your bow. Others ride with you, 3 young men your age and 2 older warriors who have seen what you have not. Your uncle leads. His face is scarred, his eyes sharp as obsidian. He speaks little, but when he does, the village listens. You ride out just as the sun breaks the hills. The land stretches in every direction, flat and endless. The sky seems to press down on the earth like a dome, the clouds wide and pale. You know this land, every rise, every stream, every patch of tall grass. You've hunted it your whole life, but today, you're not alone. There are rumors of soldiers nearby, white men building wooden forts and driving herds of longhorns through sacred ground, of iron roads stretching east to west, splitting the world like a great snake, of hunters who kill not for food, but for pleasure, or bone-leaving buffalo carcasses to rot in the sun. You ride in silence, watching the horizon. Hours pass. At midday, you find them, a herd 200, maybe more, grazing in the shadow of a small ridge. They are beautiful, massive creatures, their dark shapes like ancient stones moving across the grass. Your breath catches in your chest. You feel it then, the same rush your father spoke of, the sacred thrill. These animals are more than food. They're life, spirit, ceremony. Every part of them is used, nothing wasted. The hunt begins. You and the others circle wide, moving downwind. Your heart pounds. You can feel Kanji's muscles tighten beneath you. You notch an arrow and steady your breath, One of the older warriors gives the signal a flick of the wristband. Then it begins. The world explodes into motion. Hooves, thunder, grass bends, dust rises in great clouds. The bison charge as one, the herd, becoming a living storm. You ride at the edges, bow taut, and let your arrow fly. It strikes Clingus behind the shoulder. The beast stumbles, but does not fall. Another arrow. Another. The chaos is total. You hear shouting, pounding hooves, and the high whine of arrows in flight. Kanji swerves and leaps as if she were born for this. You are flying between death and purpose. Then it's over. The herd moves on, scattering into the horizon. You sit panting atop your horse, arrowless and shaking. Around you, the others begin to gather. 3 bison lie still, steaming in the cold air. Your uncle dismounts and kneels beside the largest. He touches its forehead gently and whispers a prayer of thanks. You do the same. Later, as the sun lowers, you help dress the kills. The smell is thick blood. Earth, spirit. You remove the hides, separate the meat, wrap the sinew, and save the horns. Everything is taken. Nothing wasted. It is hard work. Sacred work. But before you finish, you see them on the ridge to the south. 3 men, not Lakota white, dressed in stiff cloth and wide hats. One of them raises something long glinting in the sun. A rifle. Your uncle sees it too. He doesn't move, just says, back slowly. Don't show fear. You do as he says. The men don't fire. Not today. They watch as you leave, hands on their weapons, faces blank. Your uncle mutters, "That land was ours once. They kill our buffalo now. They will kill us too, soon enough." No one speaks after that. You return to the village under stars. The hides are tanned. The meat is shared. Children run with strips of fresh jerky, laughing, their faces smeared with fat. The women sing. The elders nod their approval. It is a good hunt, but something inside you feels heavy, like the ridge still waits for you. That night, you dream of the bison, but they are not moving. They lie still, scattered across the prairie. Thousands of them. Flies buzz above. Their eyes are open, staring at nothing. A railroad cuts through their bones. Smoke rises in the distance. You wake with your fists clenched, and outside, the wind has shifted again. Morning breaks, with no fanfare. The sky is a dull gray, layered with thin clouds that stretch like worn cloth. You rise quietly and stretch your aching legs. The events of the day before still thrum behind your ribs something. Between pride and unease, the meat has been preserved. The hides are being scraped and stretched by the women near the edge of the village. Life carries on in rhythm, as it always does. But you can sense it just under the surface. A shift, a slow unraveling. You walk to the lodge of the elders, where your uncle already sits cross-legged by the fire. His face is stone. They've moved closer, he says, without turning. The whites, you sit beside him. The fire crackles between you. There's a piece of smoked meat in your hand, but you're not hungry. They're building a post along the river, he continues. A trading camp, they say. But I've seen their wagons, their guns. They're hunters. They're not here to trade. You say nothing. There's nothing to say. Another man enters, older, wrapped in a buffalo robe. His name is V. He's seen more winters than you can count, and remembers the days before the treaties. He speaks slowly. The army has come. Scouts say their flag flies near Bear Butte. Not far now. Your uncle's hand tightens. They bring more than soldiers. They bring laws, papers, promises written in their own tongue, promises they never keep. The conversation is not new. You've heard it 100 times around fires, over meals, whispered between families as children slept. The land is changing, and with it, everything you've ever known. You are sent out with others to scout the hills. The trail is quiet, but you see the signs. Wagon tracks carved into the earth, and trash left behind, broken bottles, and cloth scraps. You pass a stream that once ran clear, now cloudy with silt. A dead deer lies near the bank, not butchered, just shot and left. One of the men riding with you spits into the grass. They don't know how to live here. They don't know how to respect the land. He is right. For your people, the land is not something to be conquered. It is sacred, alive. Every stone, tree, and stream has a spirit. Every animal is a lesson. Every season a teacher. The whites do not see this. They see borders and boundaries, property, paper deeds. That evening, a small group of white hunters approaches the village. They carry rifles and wear smug expressions. One of them speaks through a translator. "We come in peace. We only want to trade." The elders meet them at the edge. You stand just behind, arms crossed. The translator speaks quickly, but you hear the arrogance in the hunter's voice, even without understanding all his words. They offer canned food, wool blankets, a tin of tobacco, and bullets. In exchange, they ask for dried meat, hides, and horses. One of the elders refuses. He steps forward, eyes locked on the tallest man. "You killed a buffalo for sport," he says flatly. "You poison the rivers. You leave your dead behind. You do not belong here." The white man laughs. He laughs. It is not an argument. There is no violence, but they leave with nothing. And you know they will return with others, with more guns. That night a meeting is called. The entire village gathers around the fire. The elders speak first about diplomacy, memory, and strength. Then the younger warriors speak of anger, of defense, of the need to act. Your uncle remains quiet until the very end. Then he stands. "They will take the land, the herds, our ways. They have already begun. But we will not vanish like smoke. We will not run like deer in the grass." He looks around slowly, meeting every gaze. "We fight, not to win, not for glory, but to remember who we are." The fire cracks loudly then, as if punctuating his words. No one claps, no one cheers. It is not that kind of speech. You lie awake that night, staring at the sky. The stars are fewer than they used to be. Or maybe the sky is just getting smaller. You remember your grandfather's stories of the old days, when the plains stretched endlessly and the buffalo darkened the horizon, when rivers ran with fish and the eagle's cry was the only alarm you needed. He said once, "The land listens to those who listen to it, but the land is going deaf now." 3 days later, you ride again, this time not to hunt. You carry a rifle taken from a battlefield years ago. It's heavy and clumsy in your hands. You still prefer the bow. But these are new times. Your group is small, your uncle, 2 seasoned warriors, and you follow the wagon trails to the west, where the white hunters were last seen. You're not looking for a fight. You're looking for a warning, a message. The sky darkens as you ride. Storm clouds swirl above, heavy and mean. You spot them camped near a dry ravine, 7 of them, with 2 wagons and a circle of tents. One of them is skinning a bison. The others drink from bottles, laughing loudly. There are at least a dozen hides stacked near the fire, sun-dried, and left open to the rain. You can see flies swarming the carcass. The smell turns your stomach. Your uncle raises a hand. "We take the hides. We burn the wagons. No blood unless necessary." You nod. The wind rises. The assault is swift. You ride in from the east, weapons raised, cries piercing the wind. The whites scramble, shocked and stumbling. One fires a shot wildly, it misses. Another trip and fall into the fire. You grab 3 hides and sling them over Kanja's flank. A warrior sets fire to a wagon wheel. The flames leap fast. You are gone before they recover. You return to the village with smoke trailing behind you, like a long thread unraveling across the sky. That night, the drums are quiet. Everyone knows what this means. You've crossed a line. One of the white men does not forget. You've hurt their pride, and pride makes men dangerous. Even now, you wonder, had you done nothing, would it have changed anything? Or are you just playing your part in a story already written? A story where the buffalo vanish, the rivers dry, and the warrior must choose between silence and resistance. And what does it mean to resist when the world no longer speaks your language? The sun rises as if nothing has changed, but everything has. You're back at the village, but the silence feels heavier than usual. Even a dog scents at they pace at the edges of camp, sniffing the air, uneasy. The elders speak little now. They gather in tight circles, eyes narrowed, voices low. The smoke from last night's fire still clings to your clothes, to your memory. You didn't kill anyone. Not yet. But you know it's coming. 2 days later, scouts return with news. Soldiers, cavalry, 30, maybe more, riding fast, a column of dust at their backs and metal on their shoulders. They're headed straight for the river. You remember the wagons you burned, the hides you took. Your uncle doesn't yell, doesn't blame. He only nods and begins preparing. The next hours are a blur of motion. Women gather children. Food is packed, hidden beneath leaves and brush. Old ones are moved to higher ground. Warriors oil their rifles, sharpen their blades, and tighten their braids. You ride with them not away, but toward. You ought to scout the ridge beyond the pines. You ride light, no bow this time. Only the rifle and a hunting knife. The air is thick with heat, the kind that turns the sky pale and bleaches the grass underfoot. When you reach the rise, you lie flat in the brush and watch. There. Blue uniforms, yellow sashes. Their boots shine even in the dust. Their flag flaps limp in the dead wind. They've stopped at the ravine where your people burned the wagons. They're digging something. You lift the spyglass your uncle gave you. It's cracked on one side, but it works. They're digging graves. The soldiers work in pairs. A white officer shouts instructions while others stand guard. You count 32 men and 4 wagons, at least a dozen rifles. You can't see their faces clearly, but you don't need to. You already know they're angry. You return quickly. Your heart beats like hooves inside your ribs. When you report back, the council is waiting. The question hangs in the air like smoke. Fight or run? Some argue that you must stand your ground. Others beg for retreat. Your uncle speaks last. He rises slowly, bones creaking. We have lost much, he says. Land, herds, dignity. But we have not yet lost ourselves. He pauses. The firelight flickers across his cheek. But if we stay and fight now, arrogant soldiers trained for war, with our children behind us, we will lose everything. And so, before the moon rises, you leave. Not in fear, but in strategy. The village breaks apart, like smoke scattering in the wind. You travel at night, heading toward the tree-covered hills, to land more difficult for horses and wagons. You know these ridges better than any map. The army does not. Still, every sound feels dangerous. A branch cracking, a cough from a child. Even the beat of your own heart feels too loud. After a day's journey, you settle in a hidden valley. The elders know this place. It was used generations ago, before even your grandfather's time, when the Sioux still moved with the seasons and followed the buffalo freely. Now, even freedom must be hidden. In the quiet days that follow, you hunt small game, rabbits, grouse. You tan hides, stitch moccasins, and keep watch. But the world outside is changing fast. Scouts return with bitter news. The soldiers have built a fort by the river. Another group of whites has arrived, surveyors. This time, they carry instruments and notebooks and speak of railroads. The metal snake is coming, and with it, more settlers, more soldiers, more fences. One night, an elder woman speaks around the fire. Her voice is soft, almost a whisper. We lived through the hunger winter. We lived through the coughing sickness. We lived when the buffalo were plentiful. And when they were gone, she looks at you, eyes wet with firelight. But this ... This is different. This is a sickness we cannot see. A sickness of forgetting. You know what she means. Your younger brother no longer knows the old stories. Children now learn English words, learn how to eat from cans, How to shoot the white man's rifle, they ask. Why the spirits do not answer, as they once did. You wonder too. One morning, your uncle calls you aside. He places something into your hands. It's a medicine pouch, old, worn. The leather is cracked at the edges. This belonged to your grandfather, he says. Inside is a small stone, smooth and red, a feather, a claw, and a piece of dried root. He closes your fingers around it. You must carry our people forward now, not just with weapons but with memory. You nod, but the weight of it is heavier than any rifle. Weeks pass. The army builds roads. The railroad inches closer. A treaty is proposed. You do not attend the talks, but your uncle does. He returns with a face like carved bone. They say we must move, he says flatly. To the reservation, that it is for our own protection. He laughs, bitter and low. They say we will be fed, educated, that we will be made citizens. He looks at you then, and you see something in his eyes you've never seen before. Tiredness. Real, bone-deep tiredness. But still, he stands. Still, he fights. A final meeting is called, one last gathering under the cold sky. The vote is taken. Some will stay hidden in the hills, refusing every paper and promise. Others will go to the reservation, trying to survive inside the fences. Neither path is clean. Neither is victory. You remain with your uncle. You choose to stay. The winters grow harder. The buffalo are gone. Your people become few. But you teach your nephew the stories? You bring him to the ridge, where you once lay in the brush, watching soldiers dig graves. You tell him why it matters. And one day, when your legs are too weak to run, and your hands too stiff to fight, you give him the pouch. And he carries it forward. Because that is survival now. Not war. Not blood, but memory. You're awake before the sun, coughing from the cold, and the cold dust still clinging to your nose and throat from yesterday's shift. Your blanket is damp. Your boots are frozen stiff. The walls of your tent flap in the wind like a sail pulling toward nowhere. It's your third week working for the Central Pacific Railroad, and the calluses on your hands are beginning to split open. Outside, the camp stirs slowly. A few men cough from their tents. Someone yells in Cantonese. Someone else curses in Irish. There's a fight brewing near the cook tent again. Nobody here is sleeping well, or eating much, or expecting to make it through this job without injury, or worse. You lace your boots and wrap your neck with a threadbare scarf, stepping outside into the rising light. You're high up now, somewhere in the Sierra Nevada, though you've long lost track of the exact location. The mountains don't have names here, just scars, where dynamite has ripped open the rock to make room for rails. You've helped carve them. The air is thin and metallic. You can smell the iron, the powder, and the soot. The foreman yells for the dynamite crew. That includes you. Today, you're helping blast a tunnel. You start the morning swinging pickaxes through half-frozen rock to clear out yesterday's rubble. The hours are numbing first from cold, then from repetition. Dig all. Stack. Dig again. Even when the sun rises fully, the chill lingers. It never really leaves. You work beside a man named Wei, who speaks little English, but always smiles when he hands you a chisel or nods toward danger. He lost 2 fingers last week when a charge went off early. He came back the next day anyway. There are no sick days here, just empty beds. Lunchtime means salted pork, stale bread, and maybe beans. The meat is mostly fat and gristle. You don't complain. It's food. The company deducts the cost from your pay, whether you eat it or not. After the meal, it's time for the charge team to go in. That's you again. You carry a wooden box of nitroglycerin sticks, hand-packed in wax paper. It's too cold to sweat, but your hands shake anyway. You've seen what happens when someone drops a stick. No one speaks as you march the crates down into the mouth of the tunnel. The walls sweat moisture. It drips onto your collar. Your boots slosh through freezing mud and pooled snowmelt. Inside, the tunnel is a monster's throat black. damp, echoing with the shuffle of feet and the soft scrape of tools. It's narrow and low. You have to stoop as you place the charges. One man drills the holes, another sets the sticks. You tamp the earth down over the powder with the back of your shovel. Then you light the fuse and run. You don't wait to look back. You just run like hell. Every step echoes in your skull like a drumbeat. When the blast comes, the mountain jumps under your boots. Stone shrieks and collapses in on itself. Dust erupts out of the tunnel mouth like smoke from a dragon's breath. You return when the air clears. Sometimes there's nothing left to see. Just mangled rock or bodies. But today is clean. Just rubble. Just more rock to dig. And so, you keep working. That night, in camp, you hear a new arrival speaking with the clerk. He's German, by the sound of his accent. He says he came from New York by wagon. He wants work. The clerk laughs. There's always work. He just better not care about losing a few toes. You head to the tent you share with 4 others. 2 are sleeping already. 1 is coughing blood into a handkerchief. The last is sitting cross-legged, mending his shirt with horsehair thread. No one speaks much at night. Words take energy. You all save that for tomorrow. You stare at the ceiling of the tent, where ice has formed along the seams. You think of your home, wherever it was. It feels like 1,000 miles ago. You think of the money. 2, that's why you're here. $10 a month. They promised maybe 15 if you work the explosives. It's enough to send back to your mother, if you live long enough to send it. Your eyes grow heavy. You'll sleep with your boots on. Tomorrow will be the same, and maybe a little worse. The next day begins just like the last, only colder. Snow has started to fall, just a light powder at first. But by mid-morning, it thickens into wet, clinging flakes. The air stings when you breathe, and your eyelashes freeze together. Everyone's moving slower now, but no one dares stop. The railroad doesn't wait for weather. It waits for no one. You and Wei take your usual place on the charge team. The foreman's voice cuts through the wind, barking orders in a slurry of English and curses. You nod, grip the wooden box tighter, and head back to the dark, icy tunnel that's been swallowing your hours, your strength, and maybe your sanity. Inside the tunnel, it's worse. Water is seeping down the stone walls and freezing into slick sheets of ice underfoot. You nearly fall twice before even reaching the blast site. The cold has turned your hands to blocks of numb meat, barely able to grip a fuse or handle a charge. The drill crew has already made the deep, clean cuts into granite, ready to hold your nitroglycerin sticks. You kneel and place the charges carefully. Too carefully, maybe. You're behind schedule already, and the foreman's pacing at the tunnel mouth like a wolf who smells fear. Then it happens. One of the newer workers, a young man from the plains, shouts in panic. His glove slipped. The fuse is too short. He lit it anyway. There's no time out. Someone screams, "Maybe?" It's you. Chaos explodes. Men stumble over each other in the dark, clawing toward daylight. One man drops his lantern. The tunnel is swallowed in pitch black. You run, sliding, scrambling. You hear the blast behind you closer than it should be. Stone and air slam into your back. The shockwave knocks the breath from your lungs. You're thrown forward, your face scraping the frozen ground. Silence. Then coughing, groaning. A lantern flickers to life somewhere behind you. You're alive. The others aren't. Their names aren't remembered. That night, the cook serves less food, and no one talks. Wei pours a shot of rice wine into a tin cup and pushes it toward you. You nod, drink, and pass it back. It's barely enough to warm your tongue. The next morning, the bodies are already gone, wrapped in blankets, buried in snow, or dumped beside the trail until spring. The clerk deducts their meals from the ledger. No need to waste rations. Work goes on. Weeks pass. You climb higher through the mountains. The snow deepens. Some days, you can't see the sun at all. Just clouds that hang low enough to brush your hair. Eventually, you reach the summit tunnel. Tunnel, no. 6. It will be the most difficult passage, yet a quarter-mile through solid granite. The company estimates it'll take months. You know better. There are whispers now of Chinese workers striking. They want higher pay at least equal to the Irish crews. Right now, they earn less and work longer hours. Some want to return to San Francisco. Others talk of escape, though. Where they'd go in the mountains is anyone's guess. You think about leaving too, sometimes. But where would you go? You're already past the point of return. The only way out is forward. They try a new method. Here, working from both ends of the tunnel and from a vertical shaft, sunk straight down through the mountain. They call it heading and benching. Men lower themselves into the shaft on ropes, swinging hammers and picks by lantern light. Others haul rubble up with pulleys and wheels. The shaft fills with smoke and dust. The air turns so bad you can't speak without coughing blood. Every now and then, someone falls. There's no ceremony, just a hollow echo down the shaft and silence. One night, during a rare, clear sky, you look out over the mountains and think of the line you're helping build a thin, unbroken path of iron stretching from California to Utah. Eventually, it will connect with the Union Pacific and run all the way to Omaha, then Chicago, then the East Coast. It feels too big to imagine. You're just laying a few feet at a time. But this impossible, deadly work is what the newspapers call progress. Some days, company inspectors ride in on horseback. They wear clean coats and polished boots and smell faintly of tobacco instead of smoke and sweat. They smile, shake hands, and remind you how important your job is, how you're building the future. You want to believe them, but mostly you just want gloves that don't tip, shoes that don't leak, a day off without pay cuts. One night, Wade tells you he's leaving. He has saved enough. He's heading back to San Francisco, maybe south to Los Angeles. He offers you a place in his cousin's shop laundry work. Safe, dry. You don't answer right away. You lie back in your bunk and listen to the soft sounds of wind against canvas. Somewhere, a harmonica plays a quiet tune. It drifts across the camp like a memory, trying to find a home. You think of your mother, of the $10 a month you promised to send, of the iron rails slowly stretching east. You fall asleep with the sound of rocks cracking in your ears. Tomorrow, you'll decide. If you live through one more day, you decide to stay. Not because you're brave, not because you want glory, not because the job is good, everyone knows it isn't. You stay because leaving now, after everything, feels like a kind of death in itself. Like erasing the struggle would make it meaningless. So, you keep going. Day after day, your boots are cracked, your coat is patched with old flour sacks, and your shoulders feel like stone. But you keep going. The summit tunnel becomes your whole world. Every inch gained on that mountain feels like a small, bitter victory. Winter clamps down hard in January. Avalanches sweep across the slopes. Men vanish, buried in white silence. You dig for them with shovels, pickaxes, and bare hands. Sometimes you find them. Most times, you don't. To survive. Some men dig snow cave. They sleep underground, wrapped in burlap and breathing warm air off one another. You do the same when storms roll through, sealing off even the canvas tents. The only light comes from a single candle stub, flickering like it's trying to quit. The days blend. Weeks vanish. Sometimes you dream of green hills and warm rice. Sometimes of fire and falling rocks. But every morning, you wake and return to the granite womb. Then at last breakthrough. March 1867. The two ends of the summit tunnel meet, just off-center. The surveyors blink at their instruments, adjust their measurements, and then shrug. It's close enough. A straight, dark path now runs from one side of the Sierra Nevada to the other. The men cheer, but weakly. Most are too tired to feel much. You stand at the mouth of the tunnel and stare down its length. The wind whistles through like a sigh of relief. You've moved the mountain. By summer, the tracks are laid across the summit. Spikes are hammered and ties are set. You help install the final lengths of rail through the tunnel. Then watch as the first locomotive pushes through, belching black smoke into the stone ceiling. It doesn't feel real. The train disappears down the far side. Cheers erupt from the white-capped ridges above. Flags wave. Reporters scribble notes in their journals, but no one writes down your name. There are no medals, no plaques, no photos of the Chinese crews. Some of the Irishmen get mentioned in company letters. Their names appear in ledgers and on payrolls. But the Chinese, you're listed by number, sometimes just by character marks. Someone guessed that. Wei sends a letter. He made it to San Francisco, found work, and is earning more washing shirts than he did blasting rock. He asks if you're still alive, if you're still building, if you're still angry. You don't write back. There's no address to send it from. You keep moving east. The line presses onward through Nevada and Utah. The land flattens, but the work never does. You lay track across the salt flats, across barren valleys, where the sun cooks your bones through thin cloth. Some men collapse and don't rise. Others vanish in the night, walking off into desert mirages. You begin to see soldiers now. They ride alongside the crews, watching. Some protect against bandits or local tribes resisting the tracks. Others are there for labor control. Strikes begin, small at first, just refusals to work without water, then demands for shorter hours and fairer wages. The company responds quickly, sometimes violently. Rations are cut, strikers are replaced, tents are burned. A few disappear entirely. You keep your head down, but the thought grows louder. This was never about progress, not for people like you. It was about speed and profit and breaking anything that stood in the way. Then, in May 1869, word spreads like fire. The meeting point is set, Promontory Summit, Utah. The Union Pacific is coming from the east, the Central Pacific from where you started is nearly there. The Golden Spike is prepared. You're told it's a celebration, a triumph. You're allowed to wear your best shirt, if you still have one, but they won't let you attend the ceremony. Chinese workers are told to stay down the hill, out of sight. This is a white man's moment, so you stand on the slope with 100 others and watch from a distance. You see the two locomotives meet. You hear cheers and see champagne bottles raised. You see men in polished boots swing ceremonial hammers at the Golden Spike. They miss twice before hitting it. You smile, then walk away. The line is finished, but for you and thousands like you it's already over. Some men head back to California. Others drift into mining camps, laundry houses, and farming. A few head east, testing the new rails. Most disappear from records entirely. You stay a little longer. You help with final grading, some tie replacement, and a few bridge checks. Eventually, your contract ends. You take your last pay in coins and walk south along the tracks. Just another shadow among many. You leave no letters, no photographs, no grave, but you helped build the bones of the nation, 1 mile at a time. And even if no one remembers your name, every train that crosses these mountains still runs on the scars you left behind.